Oops. Get you under here. Okay. All right. Wow. Am I recording? Yeah, I'm recording. I had a problem with that. Yeah, today we're here sitting again with Adam Gerics. How you doing, Adam?
And we're back.
We're back, yeah. Hold on here, I gotta pull something up here.
All right.
Yeah, so, had to get your name tag out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, the election was held Tuesday,
Primary, yeah.
the primary, and did you get any write-ins?
I haven't checked.
Yeah,
I haven't checked. No, I didn't really care about the primary. Well, the thing is, it's like I don't know. That just demonstrates what we've been talking about up to this point. Is it's like a way to like cut the wheat from the chaff or whatever. So now you end up with one person on the ballot. Then what's to vote for? It's a given at that point. Like why even have a second election unless you got somebody like me, or maybe the option of writing somebody that you want in there, even if it's only one or two write-in votes. But like I said before, also I kind of considered him running unopposed anyway because Trishelle Young is just basically worthless and nobody has any confidence in her abilities at all.
So I don't know nothing about her. Was she a lawyer, right?
Yeah, she was city attorney for a little while there for the city of Flint.
I admit my ignorance in that because there's so much crap going on around Flint. A lot of times I just black it out.
Yeah.
Because basically, I know it's not going to lead to anything good. I'll just get my blood pressure up.
Right.
And nothing will come positive will come of it. Right. So.
Or nothing will come of it at all anyway.
No.
Or it's a repeat of the same old crap. Like it's totally off subject, but the old Heartland Manor that used to be across from Atwood Stadium that they tore down. Okay. Back in the day, the EMT used to call it Auschwitz because it was such a horrible place for elderly people. Anyway, they've since torn that building down. It was one block over from my house on Stone before I left, and I was riding my bike by there the other day. Just speaking of like the same crap, different decade or whatever. They're putting in, they put in asphalt paths, kind of through it on the, I guess what is that, Fifth Avenue, facing Hurley side, and in those stupid little exercise. Womanized timber 4x4 with a sign in it, and how to do a certain type of stretch. Didn't they do this like 20 years ago doing urban renewal? Is this not the same crap being recycled over and over and over again? Like, what does that do? How did that make it nicer? Somebody's gonna hit it with spray paint or something. Or it's just gonna sit there and rot away. It's like the most ridiculous things that they want to call improvements. Sometimes it's just a repeat of the same crap over and over again.
I don't know if you noticed. There's a few down there by the library. There's like those things like they're signs, but they're kind of at an eye level. There's kind of like look almost like a table, but they're at an angle. Yeah. And they have spread all over on the bike trail, and there's like 2 or 3 of them I know are just destroyed.
Yeah.
And then one of them is covered by shrubs. It's like they'll do the inconsequential stuff, and they make such an emphasis on.
Oh yeah, it's like when they were doing all the playgrounds during the height of the water crisis. Like, we built this playground for because of the water crisis. Like,
so get your kids, take it to kids there. They get dirty and thirsty, but you can't go home and use the water. Right. It doesn't make sense to me.
It was like one of the worst examples of just excess, stupid spending for no reason. But back to the fact is that nothing. I see it as nothing really changes. There's a status quo they need to maintain like any other government, and the only time anything radical comes out of it is during a crisis. They don't really do anything themselves. Even the Fair Housing Act that passed required half the city's African American black folk to camp out on the front lawn. But the council itself, they weren't making any moves toward anything progressive as far as that goes. So it's all the same crap. Just one layer of corruption that lends it off and hands it off like a torch to the next layer of corruption.
And guess what? They're the councilman a couple years, then you'll see them move up in the ranks to another, like the state rep seat, and then they'll go up higher. Then they'll come back and get another pension. Right. We recycle them.
Right.
It's very Neely's.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We just brought the State Incompatible Public Offices Act. It brings that back to mind because that's like one thing that's consistently violated in Flint politics and Genesee County politics.
Yeah.
I find. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned the old drain commissioner, Jeffrey Wright, then making that, they were trying to build that pipeline, which, you don't hear anything about that now. But anyway, bringing water down from the lake. And the board that he created and the people that were on it were also city officials or public officials, and they should not have been on that same. But nobody did anything about it, and me and a few activists brought that to the attention of Layton's office, and never got a response on it. But it's common. It's common for that group of people, I guess. It's like they're their own species or race of people that work in politics and then back into public official status of some sort, working for the government or some board or some nonprofit, that's in that cycle of people. So I don't know. It's pretty funny. Nothing really changes. Everything kind of stays the same, no matter how much they pretend they're making things change.
I don't see anything changing, and I don't see how they can. You got the same minds behind it.
Right.
They're going to come up with the same solution,
Right.
and then
What solution?
it's the same solution. There is no solution.
Right.
It's just basically money spent.
So,
Time wasted.
So is it wrong to be like idealistic or altruistic? Is that what that means? Is you can't get into one of those positions and actually do something beyond lip service about an issue? Who has actually done that?
I don't know. I'm 57. I've been aware of Flint politics since I was pretty young.
Yeah.
Jim Rutherford, when he left, nice guy. He'd been the police chief just before you were born, I think. But anyway, he was a nice guy. Grew up on the east side, I guess, before I was around, I guess. But nice guy. But when he left office and all the other administrators and his administration left, they all set up businesses around Flint.
Right.
Where'd they get all that money? They had a lot of money.
Well, and even if it's not the money, it's just the fact that it's like who like whether or not you can get a permit. Say like I'm being denied permits for my property in Montrose because my neighbor is buddies with the Montrose supervisor, Emmendorfer. And he's buddies, self-proclaimed buddies with the police chief and the cops and everybody in Montrose, and guaranteed I wasn't going to get a permit to work on my property, not one bit, because he didn't like me. I was a Flint N-word to him.
Oh.
And
You said the N-word?
yeah.
Wow.
Well, his words were, I don't want to piss anybody off, but, he said, we're tired of these Flint niggers making their way out here because of the water crisis. Like, I guess talking about how some people have migrated out of Flint because of the water crisis, or they're just finally starting to feel the push of inner city moving toward Montrose as it has done, say, Clio or something. I don't know. They're kind of behind the times in that mentality, I guess, as far as people actually spreading out beyond one little area like they were next to Buick City, and then they were allowed to be everywhere else, and then they spread out even in the Clio and shit like that. And they just, that older mentality. So it doesn't matter if you're black or white, according to these people. If you're from Flint, you're a piece of garbage, and they don't want you there. But those were his words to me. He didn't like what he saw or what I was doing. Anyway, back to the Rutherford people. It's probably because they knew people and they could get permits.
Oh, yeah.
It was a lot easier.
No doubt.
They could grease some palms,
It's an old boy network. And it's in place here. I've seen it too much, and everybody says they want me to get all hopeful, and you're so cynical, you're so pessimistic. It's like, look, I've seen this record played over and over again. All right,
well, that's
I know how it
thing.
ends.
You've seen it. See, I was thinking about that before I came in here. Some of these people that think that cops are so great or that none of this stuff is possible are living in a bubble that is never touched or affected by any of that stuff like that. And then when it does happen to some of them, they're in such utter shock that these type of things can happen. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what's a good example. Like, of course, these police should not be allowed to kill people or use brutal tactics like they do, but there's a lot of other things that they do to some people that doesn't result in fatality but has a longer-term effect on their life. And, anything from a ticket bothering you for 30 to 60 days that you got to go deal with and show up in court so you don't get a warrant, up to something maybe even worse that you didn't even do or it wasn't so bad, but they don't think it's all that bad because they never experience it. They're stuck in their little bubbles watching TV or on their computers or whatever it is. You know what I'm saying? It's not until they're actually affected by it that they might realize, and then only selfishly,
Right.
how bad it is for them.
What's it?
But this happens all the time.
Oh,
This happens all the time. You know, I got to say something before I forget it. Speaking of like how things never change, and Flint's like I guess like the old company store type of town. You know, going way back before GM with the carriages and all that. But one good example of how there's been such complicity among public officials and police and the way they've targeted and attacked people in the past is I think it was Mott, Charles Stewart Mott, during the sit-down strike period, had not much unlike Ford with his cadre of enforcers, but they had a group called the Black Legion that was funded and paid for by the anti-unionists in Flint and probably broader than that, but the Black Legion, and their job was to go around and hunt down and find union organizers and people that were like that, or socialists or whatever, and in some cases brutalize them. In other cases, they burned down their garages or something to threaten them. Some people were killed, you know, which is what led to the rise of the Red Berets, the women that, you know, the famous sit-down strikers' wives,
Yeah.
the Red Berets. They were walking around with 2x4s they'd carved into clubs to protect their husbands from these union strike breakers type people.
Well, if I did.
So it's fighting in the street, literally fighting in the street. That we have no concept of people that put so much into their lives to try to make something of themselves and then had to fight for it.
Right.
Like they did. People don't have any understanding of that. So for anybody to be shocked or surprised of any level of corruption, especially in a town like Flint, is beyond naivete. You're just outright stupid. And you haven't had no experience whatsoever in life other than what little teeny bubble you've got with your electronics and television and whatever else it is. You know, so, sorry.
No, I agree with you,
Those exercise signs made me think about that right there. You know, like it's the same shit
you
over
bring
and over.
that up. You bring that up. My mom was born in 32. My dad 1930. So they were young kids, very young when that happened. But my mom lived right there at the ground zero, basically near it. You know, by the Chevrolet the Hole.
Chevy in the Hole, yeah.
Yeah, and they had a grocery store there on West Court Street, and they took food and they smuggled it into the strikers, and they also, and I don't think they were working for the factories back then. I think they did that during the Second World War because there's such a drastic need for employees. So, my grandfather worked there, and my grandmother and my great grandparents ran the store while he was working at the factory. You know, down just a few blocks down from their house. But my dad told about that too. His grandfather was a yardman for like the railroad down there, and he had like a little office right there, like a little booth right there, and they commandeered it for a first aid station, and I guess the railroad company would probably want to put more of an argument, and he picked up his lunchbox, closed it up, and walked out and let him have it, and they said, well, he got criticized for that, and he goes, I'm not going to stand in their way. These are my neighbors, and he said, you might not believe in the union, but they're getting treated bad. And he never belonged to the UEW. He worked for the union. He worked for the the railroad. Mm-hmm. But and they had their brotherhood. It was they're more conservative. They weren't as more militant, I guess, as the unions. But the unions had to be. They bring in people like in some places they had the Pinkertons, where it's like legendary brutally people.
Right.
And then
wasn't there an island in Pennsylvania that got like assaulted by the National Guard? It was like a steel production.
Oh yeah.
Island.
Yeah, I can't remember all the details, but I don't know if that was I don't know if that was the Carnegie.
I think maybe it was.
Yeah, I think it might have been. I know a lot of those guys did overreact. Like my friend who was an historian here in Flint, he told me that during an interview one time, C.S. Mott admitted his first response when he heard about the sit down is like, he said, "I want those SOBs out of my factory." And he didn't care how by any means possible it was done.
Right.
So, but then later on he felt regret, and he did all these public works things for and
like these fake apologies
yeah.
nowadays, right? Like, oh, I said something terrible, and I'm so sorry. Don't stop going to my page and liking my pictures. It's the same kind of shit, just different era. You know what I mean?
So it was weird though growing up around Flint. My dad wasn't a union member, but we didn't have an issue with it. But I mean, they got paid way better than my dad did if he worked at the post office. But I mean, it's like it's almost become like a a bad thing to say that you actually are concerned about labor. I mean, I have a hard time talking around certain people, friends of mine. I'm a libertarian, but these people are like more from the upper crust. Their families are maybe management or business owners, and they just roll their eyes. But I mean, I see both sides of the issue. I think the unions later on become corrupt
Absolutely.
and brutal, just as bad as the people they fought.
Right.
But
Well,
they
look at today. Isn't it the president of the UAW on corruption charges or something?
yeah, I think so.
It's nothing's changed. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's very common.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, especially everybody knows about the Teamsters, Hoffa.
Right.
You know, where is Jimmy still?
Right.
Nobody ever knows. But the unions did become corrupt, but nobody can actually deny that there was a need.
No,
I mean, if they do,
absolutely.
they're totally asses. They're
Right.
total asses in the
Absolutely.
S9.
Well, then the fact what you brought up about these are my neighbors. We don't experience that the same way anymore either.
No.
You go home, and the guy next door is working on the line with you, and every day. So you don't have that intimacy nowadays like you did before. That and there's a whole argument about the degradation of the family unit and how Americans communicate with each other and all that stuff like that. But back then, there was still more of that familial connection. Like any city block I've lived on, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, with my mom, I didn't want to have anything to do with my neighbors at all, And maybe if I worked with them and we were all, going to the same place and had some reason to relate, then maybe. But I mean, I look around and I don't see anybody I know, I don't or care about, have any idea about, and then you watch their behaviors on top of that, and you who would want to associate? I mean,
Right.
It's just amazing that we have such a disconnect.
Well, I wouldn't want to talk to a lot of people around me, the studio or where I actually live, because if you reveal too much about your personal information, they're going to use that
Right.
to break in your house.
Right.
You
Or
just
something
don't
terrible.
let it out.
Right. Yeah, it's weird, that isolationism, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
At least it's perceived as being necessary.
Well, that's why we used to say in Carriagetown, even though they hated chain link fences, which were Victorian, by the way.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, because if you look in the old Sears Roebuck catalogs, they were selling chain link fences, 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, absolutely, along with iron fences. But we used to say fences make the best neighbors.
See, some of the neighbors I had, I like to have like a cyclone wire and barbed wire. I mean, I didn't really like a lot of my neighbors
Right.
because they did some bad deeds.
Yeah.
Bad deeds.
Probably unpunished.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Which is common, but
I see. I don't want to defund the police. We go back to we go right now the current situation defunding them, but for all the intents and purposes, living here and how many times I had to call the cops because I mean almost like legally obligated to do that. I just get this like a hostility from them and this arrogance and this pissed off attitude that they have to be bothered by it.
right, they got to
So
do something.
what'd you say?
They got to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm just tired of it. And it's like, they say, why are you so abrupt with us? Why are you so brusque with us or brusque with us? But I said, I put up with you people for years. And I
get
call you
nothing
for a
from you.
reason. You don't get a lot of complaints from me. And all I do is get share snottiness.
Yeah.
I don't see why I have to pay for that.
Right. Well, I mean, you bring that up, and that reminds me of what I have to do to follow up with the videos we put out before. My mom's car getting rammed into by that drunk 21-year-old, and then having to literally fight to get a crash report filed. Well, that was over a month. Over a month ago now. It took 2 weeks to get the crash report. It's been 2 weeks since the crash report, and I don't think anybody's followed up with my mother. And I tried to follow up the other day by calling the desk sergeant's phone number, and then I think in the recording you can get directed to traffic. Either way, this is hit and run. I know it's just a misdemeanor. It's only 90 days, $100 fine. But the fact of the matter is it happened in such a way that the police knew who had done it and did not go and do anything about it, and fought tooth and nail not to do anything about it. And so really, to me now, it's about the principle of the matter. That, and they wanted to dwell on the civil aspect of it, which was absolutely none of their business and had nothing to do with the crime that was committed. So I tried to follow up the other day, like I said, and nowhere, got absolutely nowhere. Recording after recording, it would ring till it hung up. So, like, the only other thing to do would be to call when you know you can find a lieutenant and see what you can't get done. But no one should have to follow up this hard, even on, and it might seem minor to some people, but no one should have to follow up this hard on a crime that was committed against you.
Well,
You know, it's ridiculous that, well, I mean, just that night alone was ridiculous that he knew who had done it, knew where he had went, and did nothing about it at all. Didn't go to question him, didn't go to get a breathalyzer. I mean, if it happened at 11:30 and we were notified at 2, because, that's actually pretty good, because they tell us they're not going to respond for 6 hours most of the time, unless somebody's bleeding or dying on the street. So for them to get there at 2 when it happened at 11:30 is not bad. Now, the breathalyzer might not have been as potent of a reading by that point, but it still would have demonstrated whether or not this kid was drunk, which he admitted to me later. But none of that happened. None of that happened at all. It was not important enough after a van was totaled on a side street for them to bother doing their job, and then to struggle the way we did to get the complaint was just, it's absurd, So,
I've got stories that I don't want to go into because of they're still enraging to me to actually recount because of and it was people causing problems for my family and dealing with the city police here, and they're just total apathy, anger. They're dealing with us. I basically don't know why they expect me to be so compassionate and so understanding about their needs for support in the community when they never done anything to come support me when I really needed them.
or the community, I mean, it's
So,
obvious,
And it's like I'm so tired of saying, well, they're short staffed, they're under budgeted. Okay, I had incidents that happened in the 70s when he had full employment. They're booming.
Yeah.
They're getting money rolling in. They were inept, incompetent, thuggish,
yeah,
and that's been since the 70s. This is a 2020.
right,
It's not just because they don't have the budget.
right.
I mean,
That's nothing's changed. I mean, it's the same stuff over and over again. I do support defunding the police, though. But I mean,
What do you mean by that?
that's my idealism.
How would they have anything happen then? I mean, even for the accident report that you wanted to be able to file.
Well, yeah, but at that point, it goes back to whether or not I get the right to file a complaint against somebody, and I shouldn't have to rely on a police officer. See, that's part of the failure of the prosecutor's office as an institution.
Okay, that's
good.
good.
That it removes the individual's responsibility and right to bring up the issue that a crime had taken place against them. Probably be now, I would assume more than ever, if they were to go back to doing something like that, I'm not sure if there would be a flood of people doing it or not, because there's such apathy out there on so many other issues that they may not, But at the same time, I'm not against the Wild West mentality. Listen, you want to come into my property? I love that we live in a state where you can protect yourself. You want to come into my property, threaten my family, threaten my life? I'm not calling the police. That's why they're called responders. Come, show up with a body bag. That's what I say. Because if somebody's going to break into my house or try to threaten my life or threaten my safety or my family or my dogs or anything like that, then I reserve the right to protect myself with deadly force if necessary. And in that moment, who the hell is going to try to dial 911? I could care less. This is happening.
Well, even
I'm
cops
not searching for a phone when this is happening. You know what I'm saying?
Well, even cops will say the best thing to do is try to defend yourself. I mean, the cops on the street, the ones I talk to, they say get trained in the weapon, get a weapon if you can get a weapon, and learn how to use it. If they burst in, shoot, then call us.
Right.
That's what they tell us. I mean, that's with honesty.
Then you're just the body collectors. But that's my point. Is like, what do they really do? What do they really do? Because the only time you ever see the prosecutor in any city, not just Layton and his cronies, is when a murder happens, or like Pervendorfer, the Davison High School coach that got busted taking pictures of, or he had hung a phone from a string into a tanning area and was filming a 14-year-old girl out in Clio like a year or two ago. He finally just got sentenced or whatever. I didn't catch the sentencing, but he happens to also be the brother of the Montrose Township supervisor. The name is Emmendorfer, but I've been calling him Pervendorfer for a while now.
Well, I'm going to say this, maybe the devil's advocate, but I mean, one person can't be held accountable for the actions of their own family members. I mean, I don't think that's fair.
But I tell you what, if my kid brother was filming 12, 13, 14-year-old kids or had any kind of predilection toward that, I would know about it. And I would want to distance myself from it as much as possible. And if he was caught doing anything like that, I would be on the side of, because pedophiles are the worst kind of slime on the planet. If it was my brother and he was caught, I'd throw the book at him. But I believe that Mr. Pervendorfer, the coach from Davidson High School, even though he's a sex offender for the rest of his life now, got a much lighter sentence than most other people might have gotten because he's in that echelon of people. You know, he knows. I mean, his brother's supervisor, they're buddies with all the police out there, and you know. But again, this is the only time you ever see the face of the prosecutor is when there's some kind of highlighted story that needs the face to be there. You know, somebody got killed, somebody got this high school pervert. You know. Various issues like that are, I guess, newsworthy. That's when you see him. That's when you see his face. But you don't see him put any special focus on things that are neglected or have been neglected or he himself neglects. I always fall back to the rape issue because we're not the only city in the country. But what was the last? I forgot the figure I heard the last time it was talked about. But there was some 3,000, I think, maybe more. Rape kits that have never been processed not once, and probably have degraded to the point where they're pointless anyway, you know, but where's the prosecutor on that? Well, I'd like to see him on Channel 12 or Channel 5 going, you know what, this has not been dealt with in a very long time, it needs to be dealt with, and we're going to take it seriously, and we're not going to let this kind of crime just go by again. So my, you know, shitty little misdemeanor with my mom's van getting totaled is totally minor compared to that. But again, look at all the rape cases that they don't even bother investigating, let alone prosecuting. You know, so should it be any shock at all that you've got this cop like Tuttle just driving around, basically burning gas and spending our tax dollars on only the fatalities? Because the only time a hit and run is really important legally is when somebody's seriously hurt or dies. Otherwise, they really could care less. You know what I'm saying?
I would think.
When that brings me to the point about the kid that did it too, is that I've seen this kid since riding his bike and driving with a beer in his hand. So it's going to happen again. Chance Thompson is going to hurt somebody the next time. And I would personally blame Tuttle for that.
Well, because see, that's a point I was going to try and make. Like in the city of New York City, when Giuliani was was he the mayor? Yeah, the mayor. He actually called, because he had been a former prosecutor. He knew he was going to be tough on crime. He called for minutia and you know, enforcement on all the laws. Some things I thought I really questioned, like they cordon off an area and check everybody's IDs on the street, and they only were given a brief time to get out of there if they really weren't living there and stuff like this. I have issues with that.
Yeah.
But when there's enough cops on the streets and checking everything out, there was the crime rate did plummet. And but I don't want. Who wants to live like that?
No.
You know, I mean, I wouldn't want to have to present ID to every cop I went by.
No, that's the fascism we supposedly fought in World War II. So, show us your papers.
But I mean, but when you get back to the point where you're talking about, if they had gone and pursued this guy more vigorously, the guy that hit your mother's van, they might be nipping in the bud a potential problem. They actually might be putting the fear of God in them, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, just being a lackadaisical attitude about it doesn't help.
Right, and that's why, should we defund the police? Yeah, because if they're not going to do even the most basic job that could have future consequences like that, then look at the rape cases and everything else they're not doing. What is the purpose? Other than to be an emergency response to a bad situation. If that's the case, limit them to that.
Yeah.
Limit them to that and give us back the right to go and seek prosecution on people that have committed crimes against us.
Well, so years ago, I took a class was in criminal justice over at Mott. And I don't know if most people know this, but years ago, when they first put police on the streets, they weren't allowed to carry guns.
Oh, yeah.
And basically, if there was an issue that needed a gun to address it, they had to enlist the aid of a citizen with a gun. Mm-hmm. And probably fewer, accidental shootings, because the citizen said, I don't want to put my name on this,
Right.
To me, it's just, I don't know if they're defunding the problem of is the definition of it. I've asked some people, and they said, well, they want them be defunded so they don't no longer for the militarization of the police.
Well, yeah.
Get the tanks and the anti-tank weapons and
that's
that kind of bazookas and all that.
Getting really crazy with that, for sure.
So I can understand defunding that kind of, but see, I'm all for funding the cops. I think we should be able to go out and get better trained people to be cops, because I think if they're better trained, there'd be fewer issues and fewer murders and fewer. I think maybe the best bet to go is that former military people, because they know what real intense fire is. They're not going to be so quick on the trigger, I don't think.
Yeah, and not so hot roddish with their attitude and stuff. Either way, I guess the way I see it is back to the whole idea about being idealistic. Is it idealistic? I guess, but what we're asking for is what you ask for in any big situation when it comes to social issues and politics. Is like they need to be more altruistic about what they do. If they're there to do that particular job as a police officer, then they need to stick to that. They don't. The vast majority of them just simply don't. It's just another job to them, and that's the kind of job that can't just be just another job. You can't use your authority to bully somebody. You can't use your authority because you're friends with somebody else to bully somebody. You can't. None of that. That should be like, again, in the ideal scenario, it's like I don't even know what example from a movie or TV show I could pull to put it out there, but a cop should be so on point with these issues that are constantly discussed about them, that shit gets prevented, like you kind of suggested, because they're smart enough and trained well enough to realize that they shouldn't be doing this. This shouldn't be happening, or they're not going to do some of those corrupted things because that's not what they're there for. You know what I'm saying? But they get to hide behind that power and hurt and harm people's lives in so many different ways that it outweighs them being our protectors, being our service and protection. So I don't have an answer. But, again, idealistically, you wouldn't need cops if people were actually more involved in their communities and in their immediate environment, rather than being so stretched out on ethereal things that they're, wanting to buy or watch or play or, whatever. It just seems to me like there's this mentality every generation where, it used to be this way. But it never really was this way. You know what I'm saying? It's always been this way. Shitty. But this idea that everybody's lawn was mowed and this 50s perfection of life and nuclear family, that never actually existed. These are all just constructs that people want to adhere to that don't actually exist.
I beg to differ on that one, because I grew up in an era, in this neighborhood where we're currently now, basically everybody did mow their lawn. Even the houses weren't that, they're kind of derelict on the paint jobs and stuff wasn't that well done. They did keep the lawn mowed. Matter of fact, my own grandmother, I used to remember things that was so amused by this. My own grandmother, my dad's mom, she used to judge a person by if they had a nice haircut, they baked their own bread, or if they kept their lawn mowed. Basically, these guys could be total rat bastards and anything else, but if they had a nice short hairstyle and they kept their lawn mowed, to her, they were good people. So I thought that was kind of strange itself. But another thing is too, I don't want to go like overly intellectualize this, but you probably remember hearing about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Mm-hmm. He basically contended that technology has a tendency to corrupt the morals of people, the morality of people, and also does cause a more sense of to use another sociology term, sense of feeling of anomie, friendlessness.
Yes.
But basically, I used to take classes at Mott years ago in the 80s, and people would be in the hallway waiting for class or waiting and sitting there drinking their pops or whatever, and you go by and you start a conversation with people. Well, then a few years ago, I went back to Mott, and we'd have a break for a class or something like that, and we'd go get a drink, and everybody was on their phones. Yeah, and you try to say hi to somebody, they would ignore you. Mm-hmm. So I said, "Wow," and there's like, and you didn't really get a chance to talk in class because you're in class.
Right.
So I went through like 3 or 4 classes, and when I was in a class years ago at Mott. One anatomy and physiology class. I made 4 friends, and 3 of them I'm still on a daily, almost a day-to-day basis or weekly basis of talking to them. I mean, that's unusual. That was like 38 years ago.
Right.
So I mean, but I don't know how to make this appeal without sounding hokey or really maudlin. But I mean, people do have to engage with others. I mean, that is, I think you do approach that, and I think it's a very valid point. People do have to be engaging and talk to other people, and there's a sense of friendliness or a willingness to be friendly.
Yeah.
I think that's a valid point.
My favorite one is people with earwigs or little the earbuds or whatever for their phones, where they don't have to hold a phone or carry a phone, but they're sitting talking to themselves like they're crazy. I was at the store the other day, and this woman just kept going on and on about something, and it finally dawned on me, oh, she's got an earpiece. I thought she was like just losing it, like it was weird, but yeah, technology does have a tendency to do that. But still, you still prove my point though, because just because you mow your lawn and cut your hair doesn't mean a damn thing.
Right.
All that means is that there's a little bit of investment in that area that people are able to do that, But that's still an excuse, because I mean, even nowadays, for as hard as it is, and for as derelict as some of these properties are, there are people that will mow their lawn. See, I don't like that as a yardstick, because I'm opposed to lawn mowing actually, but it's the idea that there used to be this time. No, there never used to be this time. That's because you were in a bubble.
Well, it's
you
actually
didn't see that there was this other evil going on, So that's a dream mentality to think that there used to be this time that was so great compared to. That's all about whether or not there's actually money in that area and there's a flourishing economy.
Right.
That's the only time that you see it looking pretty, but that still doesn't mean that everything is good. I can't remember. I wish I could find this artist I saw once in a book some years ago. I don't even remember I don't even know what period he was producing these paintings in, but they're paintings, oil and acrylics and stuff like that. But they were images of the 50s, that nuclear family, the perfect house, the husband in the plaid work type shirt, and woman in her little perfect nice little below the knees dress or whatever. That typical Cleaver image, right? But instead of it being like what you would think is a normal calm day in this image of a living room or something from that period, you would have the guy actually holding a knife, about to shove it into the chest of this, Mrs. Cleaver type character, so it was like the Cleavers, but terrifying and possibly real, and why this person, actually, if I could find out who the artist was, I'd know more about it, but why this person did these paintings, I'm not sure. But they were images of that perfect life with reality put into them. Because like I'm saying, during the Cleaver era, when it was supposed to be so great, there was plenty of rape, plenty of pedophilia, plenty of murder, plenty of domestic, death, and so on. So this idea that it was a greater time at some point back in history. No, life doesn't change that dramatically to where you went from Oz, the beauty of Oz, to, the ghettos of the rest of the world.
Well, Flint's always been a rough and tumble town. I mean, it's like I have people tell me, well, we never locked our doors. And I grew up in the late '60s through the '70s and '80s here. I'm looking at them like, I always lock my doors. I always look for better locks. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where you lived at. And then there's always, Flint was booming at one time, for a long period of time, I guess. And
about 30, 40 years.
Yeah. It's about that length of time now to look back to actually seeing it was that way, but
yeah, the '70s, right?
But there was never a perfect time for here. You're right. I mean, it was very gritty. I mean, this town had an underbelly that a lot of people would be shocked.
Oh yeah,
to deal with.
What was it? The Purple Gang.
Well, that was from Detroit.
Yeah, but they ran a lot of shit up here too.
Oh
yeah, I met a few of the old boys from the Purple Gang when I had that fire station that's now the brewery. When I had a club there for about a year and a half, 2 years, cannabis club, a guy come in and gave me a little history lesson on how Flint used to be back, I don't know, I guess not long after the sit-down strikes, up into the 60s and part of the 70s, but he said that north Saginaw toward Pearson, just before Pearson, that kind of stretch, once you get up the hill, was pretty much run by the Purple Gang. And as a kid, he was paid a couple dollars and given like treats and stuff to take brown paper packages of money to other groups along the North Saginaw row, So.
I was unaware of the Purple Gang presence here. I mean,
Yeah.
my family had bars and restaurants.
And his family actually opened up a brewery in Texas after that, and their family's been there ever since.
My family had a bar. My great-grandfather on my dad's side had a bar soon after Prohibition was repealed. My understanding, my thought is he probably had one before it was repealed, but it's like but across the street from the factories over on the Cross River. We're on the east side here, looking across to the west, northwest. They had a lot of after-hour joints set up, and they were very violent. A lot of stabbings, a lot of shootings, a lot of people gone missing that were never accounted for. I remember quite a few years ago, in the 70s, there was a rash of bodies being dumped out in the Hogback Hills towards the Lapeer area. I mean, there's like a plethora of them. I mean, and I never heard of them, the murderers being found out.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're walking around here, there might be 80-year-old people who murdered people.
Right.
Murderers.
Right.
So, I mean, this always had it was a shop town.
It wasn't just a 70s show.
No. No, I mean, it was part of that maybe in the burbs. But, I mean, let's face it, I say every form of dysfunctionalism in Flint that you can imagine.
Right.
Matter of fact, I think we originated some dysfunctionalisms here.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. It's not just Flint. There's not a time where it's just been, like, so wonderful and without bad things happening, the mentality. And that's what you're going to get with people like Layton, is this one and the same type of crap over and over again. All he cares about is his paycheck, just like anybody else. There's nothing in the job description that requires him to actually care about anything beyond what he has to maintain appearances. And I'm not singling him out just to single him out. I mean, Eric Mays is like that, Weaver, all of these people. If they're not actually doing something to make fundamental changes in what goes on in the town like Flint for its people, then they're only there for the show and for the applause and for the adulation. Like the one thing that bothered me the most about Weaver was that her and that doctor that got the humanitarian award or whatever for exposing Legionnaire and lead and all that crap. They knew about that 6 months prior to the election, 9 months prior to the election. They knew there was an outbreak of Legionnaires. They knew there was a possibility that there was lead in the water. And nothing was said by those camps until it became politically advantageous. And then suddenly she's our savior because she's exposing it. And Melissa Mays and all them fake activists that were around her just helped push that agenda. Well, she only made it one term, right? I mean, and what did we really get out of her? Not much of anything.
What's going on in Neely with the pipe replacement? Have you been keeping track of that?
All I know is that there's like several thousand that they still haven't quite got done yet. But, as everybody can see, they're still working on it. But I don't know. They really don't talk much about the water crisis.
No, it's gone away.
And I just want to mention, too, before I forget, that's one of those other mysterious, strange things that's happened in Flint that's never got any explanation or to me, not a satisfactory explanation. The guy that was the only person that was apparently certified at the Flint water plant out there on North Dora Highway. I don't remember his name. I'm sure if we pull it up on Google, we'll find his name. But he was found dead in his apartment, supposedly from a drug overdose or something.
Glasgow? Is that him?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But supposedly it was a drug overdose, blah, 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 he died. But the thing is that this guy was, when activists and people were touring the plant during the crisis, because I was on one of the tours, he was very upfront, very honest about what went on there. And when we brought up the fluoride issue, because people think that's a conspiracy theory issue, the fluoride in the water, he was very clear that he thought we should not be put in the water. He said that where they put it in the water, it's a poison, it's toxic. where they added it to the water in the system, he said, is completely off limits except for when they're putting the fluoride in there. It's so caustic, so toxic that it's eating the concrete away on the floor where they put it in. You know, if any falls or drips, you know, past where they're pouring it in at, it's like there's a hole being eaten by this shit on the floor, you know, whatever. But I mean, that's just like you could say that, I guess, about anything that's potent that they use in an industrial application. But 99% of that stuff is pretty much toxic too. So, you know, either way, the fact of the matter is, this guy was the only certified guy that was working there at the water plant, and then he ends up dead after discussing openly a variety of issues about the water crisis and the water plant. And to me, that's highly suspect. And being from Flint and the stuff that we've seen and experienced and heard about from the police and from the authorities, it would not shock me for 1 second that he did not die from a drug overdose. It was probably some other thing that happened to him, you know, because he was just so candid and so honest with everybody.
They didn't want that.
Yeah, they didn't want that. And he was the only certified person working there, and other people were doing the job along with him that weren't certified to do the job. So there's a myriad of images or issues around that guy that lead me to believe that there's a lot more to it than just him overdosing in his living room. I mean, you know.
Well, see, I know that one person came on here to interview with us a couple times. His name was Robert Stewart, older gentleman, and he was talking about the drain commissioner, Jeffrey Wright. He doesn't have a background in chemistry. He doesn't have a background in chemistry. Robert Stewart did.
Right.
And he was saying a lot of stuff.
I remember Robert Stewart. He was the roller skating mayor. He ran for mayor. He had roller skates and a lab coat and a white helmet.
He might have been. I mean, I don't remember that part, but I mean, he came in with Lisa Quaid show years ago, Flaming Pit, a couple years back.
I believe that was him, yeah.
And I'm friends with him on Facebook, and he was like really informative because he's saying, look, at these people got oversight on jobs they're not qualified to do, and they're getting big bucks for doing it, and look what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as if you're the prosecutor, the long shot. But if you were the prosecutor, what kind of relationship would you try to establish? Because I don't see defunding the police as a solution. And as a prosecutor, you basically have to go along with what the will of the people on that issue, you know, or whatever they decide.
Well, yeah.
But how would you say they wouldn't defund the cops? How would you try to create a relationship with the cops? How would you try to do that?
I don't know that I would want one.
But you almost have to. You have to in that role.
I mean, yes and no. I see the prosecutor's position, federal, local, state, whatever, in a biblical sense. Like, since we don't get to challenge who's done something wrong to us like we used to be able to, that is not his job. And I kind of relate it to how, I guess the most relatable story from the Bible would be the story of Job, how he, throughout the whole story, he's continually challenging Job's faith to God. So, like, there's stages where some of his things are taken, some of his herd is taken, some of his wives are taken, and at the end of the story, he ends up a cripple in the street, but he still professes his faith for God. And the whole time, the devil, Satan's job is not to do these things to Job, because God did those things to Job at the behest of Satan, because Satan was constantly challenging his faith, constantly questioning his faith, saying his in the beginning, he's so rich, God, he's got so many great things that you've blessed him with, that of course he's going to shout out he loves you, he's going to proclaim his love and faith for you. I say you take some of these things away, and he'll start to curse your name. And at the end of the story, did Job ever curse God's name? No, absolutely not. But Satan's job throughout the whole story was to question his faith, to pose the question.
The accuser. He was the accuser.
Right. So that's all the prosecutor is.
Interesting take.
Relationship with the police? No. I'm the accuser. If something is brought to my attention that the police did wrong, there should be as much effort to look into that and investigate that and find out what's going on as there is in these high-profile murders and all this other crap that makes them look good. You know what I'm saying? So my relationship would be, don't cross the line. Don't cross the line.
But I mean, you would also, as a prosecutor, though, decide which case would receive vigorous enforcement,
right?
Which would prioritize them, basically.
Right.
I was going to bring up a point about that, too. See, prosecutors are very selective, as you already alluded to several times during our
Yes.
conversation, of which ones they pursue. It seems like the ones we've had the past few times, we prosecutors, Bush, now Layton. Basically, we're media whores.
Totally.
That's my opinion.
Art Bush especially.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand me either. I had some experiences with him. I'll try to keep it short. After my son was born, I became the plaintiff, which is an unusual thing for most men to do. They find themselves in the defense position, and then they end up getting child support and all these other issues that they don't necessarily get a choice in, even if they fight, unless they're rich, and then they've got a different edge and better lawyers. But in my case, I immediately went to establish my rights. It took me 2 years to do it. I'm still the plaintiff, never been the defendant. I even started my own child support account with the state system in case she did try to demand it. I would already have money or an account started, so there'd be no argument there. But I went through all the motions. I sat in the hallway at 7th Circuit Court for hours at a time because she wouldn't show up for appearances that she was, subpoenaed for or whatever, or served to appear for. And in the end, I ended up getting like a certain measure of custody to where the next time she left the state with my son, it was a violation of the law, felony, and should be pursued. So, okay, long story short, it's going to be kind of hard, but I'm going to try. I established these rights. She leaves the state. I end up getting a felony warrant for her arrest because she'd left the state against a custody order. But the only way I could get that was not through Art Bush's office and not through anybody that you might think you should be able to go, hey, look, I've got the right, I've got the paperwork, she's violated the law, there it is, let's get him. Couldn't have that happen through Art Bush. We even had a vigil at one point out in front of his office for a couple of days, trying to encourage him to help with this case. And somebody told me that he would have beers at the Torch, and about 4:30, 5 o'clock every day, and that's usually when it's dead at the Torch anyway. So I one day just kind of happened in there, and he says immediately says, "You're that asshole." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "You're that asshole that had the vigil outside my office." I'm like, "Yeah," and I actually came in to try to ask you man to man, person to person, why is it so hard to do a basic warrant on a case that many other cases get warrants issued for? What's so different about mine? And he's like, "Well, you need to leave before I have you arrested." And I'm like, "For what?" He's like, "For being an asshole." This was the mentality of Art Bush. I mean, he did nothing.
Maybe he had too many few of those beers.
Yeah, 4:30 every day. But I got the felony warrant because this is funny. I love this story. Someday I'm going to tell my son when he's old enough to realize. I took it to the higher authority. I went to the federal courthouse. Talked to, at the time, was Haviland. He was the federal prosecutor locally. And he used to ride his bike to work.
I like that.
To the federal building, yeah. But the only reason I was able to get this warrant is because when I was discussing the issue with him, I had mentioned my ex's last name, Mativier. Pretty uncommon name.
Should have said that out loud during the show here?
Yeah, I don't care. Right. I have no sheep.
I don't want you to get hit with slander or libel or whatever.
Come and get me. I'm not slightly even remotely worried about her actions and what she's done. She's going to pay for it when she gets to heaven anyway, because she knows she's sinned against herself and her God and all that other crap. But at any rate, I mentioned the name Mativier to Haviland, and he's like, "Oh, well, we're looking for a Thomas Mativier. Is there any relation there?" So, yeah, it's her half-brother. He said, "Well, I'll tell you what. You help us find him, and I'll make sure you get that felony warrant for her arrest."
Awesome.
I got it. I still have it. I have it framed. And my ex tried to say that I manipulated the system to get my rights and then subsequently to get that warrant for her arrest. What manipulation? I did what I'm suggesting individuals should be able to do in place of the prosecutor. I pursued it. I filed a complaint. I went to court. I sat in the hallway for hours at a time knowing she wasn't going to show up, and so on and so forth. So, in the end, it still didn't really help me because nobody really likes to help enforce fathers' rights.
No.
But I will say that. Oh, and I went to the FBI just out of curiosity because, for people that don't know it, I think it's like Beach, or I forget if it's Beach or Church. It's right by the old Masonic Lodge, just before Buck and Mallet Theater.
Okay.
That's the FBI's office. It's on the corner there. It's where the parking structure used to be. It's across the street from that on the corner of that little yellow building. This was right after 9/11, and I went in with my felony warrant, all proud and happy, and slapped it on the desk or on the counter, and I'm like, let's do this, kidnapping warrant. I want to see my son. And that fucking piece of crap FBI agent said to me, well, we're a little bit more concerned with domestic terrorism right now. This is not something that we'd be interested in looking at, doing anything about. I'm like, and I literally said, this is how you create domestic terrorists, right here. You have a job to do. You have a felony warrant piece of paperwork in your face, and you don't want to do nothing about it. And you have no consideration for the amount of time and effort it took for somebody like me to go ahead and do this and get this done? Are you kidding me? But I will say, in Arapahoe County, Colorado, where she was, the Arapahoe sheriffs were fantastic. I pulled the plug at the very last minute and pissed everybody off because I could not face my son being ripped from her chest, still needing to nurse. That was and I had such a laser focus on getting to him, to see him. But we literally got there with cops around the building and everything, and we were going to go beat on the door and make her give him up. And I pissed everybody off and pulled the plug at the very last minute. And the funny thing is years later when I spoke to her about it, she said, yeah, we knew you were there. We were hiding in the basement. So it would have been, kicking the door open and guns and all that other crap. I didn't want that with my kid, so I pulled the plug at the very last minute. But, once again, it's just another story, a demonstration of how the system is inept. These people are just propped up to, present the image of a so-called democratic system, when in the end, it's all top-heavy. They get paid a lot to do very little, while everybody else below them gets paid a lot less, and they do all the work, Which, by the way, brings me to one more thing before we cut off here. On the subject, but off the subject. One thing that I think is very interesting going on that Layton could have a heavy impact on, and all local prosecutors across the country could have a heavy impact on the internet in terms of crime and in terms of, shutting some of this fake stuff down, as it were. There's such a big argument for Zuckerberg and him being held responsible for it, is the fact that there's like tons of these so-called nonprofit corporations that are only calling themselves nonprofit corporations because there's that category that you can click on the Facebook setup. But the reality is they don't have a 1099. They don't have any articles of incorporation. And I'll get into this on a different show, but Flint City Pit is a crock. It's a crock. That supposed nonprofit organization that helps pit bulls, that was Layton's cheerleaders when they tried to take me down for 17 felonies, is not even a real nonprofit. They have no listing for a 1099. I've looked them up on the IRS websites. You can't find them anywhere. So why are they calling themselves a nonprofit and collecting money but not reporting it? So this is like a huge issue online. Everything from Arthur Woodson, who's running for office now too apparently, and Melissa Mays, Flint City Pit, they're all over the place. Just because you can click nonprofit corporation on a Facebook setup page does not make you an official nonprofit corporation, and that's a total violation of the law.
It's fraud.
Yeah, it's fraud.
And people are going to donate to that. If they got a PayPal link or a
right.
Cash App link.
Nothing's being tracked there. It's a total fraud. Right.
Why won't they trace that?
That's something I'd look at.
Right.
If I was prosecutor, I'd say absolutely. I would totally surf Facebook and find all the frauds, and at the very least shut them down, if not prosecute them, depending. So.
Okay, like I always do, if you are a opponent of what we say here or Adam said here, primarily Adam,
sorry,
we got time to equal time. We'll give you a chance for equal time. You want to come in here, or maybe you do a phone call interview, or you want to address what he's addressed. We'll give you that opportunity. Just contact us through Facebook, All Points TV, and I can say that it's always interesting talking to you because you had such a run-ins with different aspects of law. That's quite amazing for one individual to have to gone through.
Well, it's because I've been involved in my community.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
But it's like only people would be willing to cut and run because they just don't want to face it.
right.
The paperwork, the price,
Right.
the cost, they make it a onus on you to do this, and they got our money coming in form of taxes to back them up, but then we got to go find additional funds to combat what they basically held a gun to us, our heads, to get from us.
That's a bad setup.
It's once you start realizing this, there's very little difference between the government and mobster.
Right.
There's very little.
Right. Exactly.
Except for they maybe have an insignia doesn't look impressive, or like a car with that insignia on the side of it.
And a nice
But other than that,
building
they're
and
not
a
much
big gun, you know.
they're basically the core of these people. A lot of them, and I'm not saying all, but many of them are
Vast
basically no different than Tony
majority.
Soprano.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Vast majority. Yeah.
So anyway, thanks again, and we'll hope to have a conversation, continuing the conversation.
Sure.
And anybody, if you want to weigh in on this, like I said, contact us through Facebook.
I think
have
there's
a
too
good day
many
there.
chicken shits out there. They won't do it. They're scared to talk to me.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Adam.
Yep.